Welcome to the Great Traits Project podcast. We investigate the character traits that drive great achievements and reveal the mindset behind success. Throughout these podcasts, we introduce you to remarkable individuals from the world of sport, business, the military, the arts, science, technology, groundbreaking explorers, and many more. We shed light on how they behave and what they believe, and we discuss their attitude to life. In November 2016, we released our first book, which is called Great Traits. The book reveals the 5 character traits that make successful people tick, and it can be found on Amazon by searching for Great Traits, or search for the author's name, Tobias Harwood, which is spelled Tobias, and then Harwood, Harwood. All the author's proceeds from the sale of the book are donated to the charity Walking with the Wounded. The reason why the proceeds are donated to the charity are explained in the opening chapter of the book. On this month's podcast, we meet Karl Hinett. Karl was serving in the Staffordshire Regiment in Iraq in 2005 when he suffered a direct hit from a petrol bomb. This resulted in 40% of his body being burnt, in particular his arms, chest, hands, legs and face. He was placed in an induced coma and he faced numerous skin graft operations to heal his wounds. 5 years later, in 2010, he completed his last operation and dedicated himself to running marathons and ultramarathons to raise money for the medical staff who helped save him and helped rebuild his life. Over a period of 52 weeks, he successfully completed 52 marathons. I'm sure you'll find him an incredibly inspiring individual. He's determined to show that a life-changing injury is not the end of life, but simply a new beginning. With that, I introduce you to Karl Hinett.
Hello, my name's Karl Hinett. I serve with the British Army in the Staffordshire Regiment. Through service, I was unfortunately injured, but I used that as motivation to do some challenges in aid of the hospital that looked after me, notably running 100 marathons in 2 years, attempting to climb some of the world's highest mountains, such as Everest, and some various other challenges, really.
Brilliant. Let's kick off, Karl, shall we, by talking about that day in Iraq. Do you want to take us through that?
Sure. So it was 2005, September. We got a call that our support was needed because we were trained in the use of Warriors, these huge 26-ton armoured vehicles, and we were to go and support some special service members because 2 British soldiers had been captured and were being held at a police station. So we went there as support, and we were greeted with what eventually formed into a riot. And throughout the course of the day, the riot just grew in confidence and getting more and more wound up, more angry, which eventually led to me being hit with a direct hit by a petrol bomb. I managed to get myself out of the Warrior. My colleagues were there immediately, who helped and carried me back to an ambulance further away from the scene in a safe area, and there began my treatment. I was transported to a field hospital, and where I was treated, and then I was put into an induced coma, and then I woke up 10 days later in Selly Oak Hospital in Birmingham.
Wow. Let's just touch on that horrific moment. So your position was in the turret.
In the turret,
is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you want to just sort of explain to people what that's like being in there, in that claustrophobic area?
So it is quite confined. There's not much space at all due to all the machinery and all the weapons systems. But it's quite it is quite comfortable. I remember spending a lot of my nights sleeping in there, because whenever I had to leave the turret, I had to take all the weapons and ammunition with me for safety reasons. So I did spend a lot of my time during my tour in that turret. And it was almost like a little bedroom, even though it was very tiny and very cramped, and you're basically surrounded by metal.
So on that day, you're you're keeping an eye out from your position in the turret, and then obviously as the crowd grew in confidence and became more aggressive, you suddenly find yourself doused in petrol. Mm-hmm. And take us through the next steps as to how you got out of the warrior.
Well, so as we were being swarmed, I felt a liquid just completely douse me, and I just had the briefest amount of time to register what the smell was, realising it was petrol, and then in that time I was alight. Instantly I was just overcome with panic, just uncontrollable panic. No idea what to do. My body sort of just seemed to shut down. But as time wore on and pain became more evident, that's when I started regaining control of my senses and realised that I needed to actually get out. So it was about 25 seconds later that I realised that I did need to get out. So that's where I gripped onto the edge of the turret to pull myself out. And it's why my hands were so badly damaged, because of gripping onto this burning metal. But it was either that little bit of extra pain or, not getting out at all. So adrenaline, pain and fear just propelled me out of the turret.
So then soon after that, you were doused with water. And I remember you saying when we spoke the first time that obviously the water can't be too cold, because ultimately that has an even more damaging effect on the skin. Yeah.
Well, luckily, due to circumstances and availability to us, the water we were drinking out there, and because of the heat, it's not like we were carrying refrigerated water around with us, but the water needed to be sort of room temperature, really, because if ice cold water gets poured onto, just imagine an extremely hot plate come out of the oven. Anything cold, it sort of has like a volatile effect. It's fizzy, it can break glass, if it's a hot glass against cold water. So it's very similar to your body as well. Temperatures skyrocketed, the after effects, you're effectively cooking for a few minutes afterwards because of the intense heat, what's just been applied to your skin and muscle. So if there's any, freezing cold water straight away, it's just going to cause more damage on the inside.
So you were placed into an induced coma for 10 days. And I remember you saying that for quite some time you weren't able to consume anything other than being on a drip. Is that right?
That's right. So for the first few days that I was brought back to consciousness, was I had tubes down my down my airways to help my breathing, feeding tubes going through my nose, and it was just it wasn't possible for me to be able to eat myself because of the medical equipment attached to me. So from the day I woke up, it was quite difficult, going from this highly active, highly responsible sort of job role, and then being in a position where you can't even move, you can't even feed yourself. It's a huge shock to the system.
And what did your weight go down to?
It dropped dramatically. I remember when I was serving and I was active, I maintained a weight about 11 stone. And then when I finally had enough strength to get up and start walking about and move on to some scales, I was hovering just over 8 stone. And it was a short amount of time, but that I was explained that the amount of effort what your body's going through to try and heal and repair, the amount of energy it's using and calories it's effectively burning, it's incredible how much just wastes away so quickly.
Yeah. And obviously along the way you had numerous skin grafts operations. Can you just can you talk through what that involves?
So a skin graft is sort of using a healthy part of skin, healthy tissue, and pouring it over damaged areas. So, for example, my hands, the backs of my hands had to be skin grafted because they went almost to muscle, the burns. So they'd take a healthy part of skin, which was normally from my thighs, which wasn't burnt or damaged, and they'd use that area of skin and place it over the damaged area on the backs of my hands, and sort of hope that the skin would take, and then that'd be like extra layers of skin being put back over onto damaged areas. So it was, trying to help recover those severely damaged areas. And I ended up having skin grafts all over the place, really, on the insides of my thighs, on my arms, even on my face. Skin grafts all over the place.
Wow. So let's talk about. So how long exactly were you in hospital for?
It was a couple of months. I was injured on the 19th of September, and it was just after Christmas. It was just after New Year that I was completely discharged from hospital. So it was a good couple of months, well over 3 months. But that still meant that I had to keep going back to hospital. That began sort of the cycle of going to Headley Court, where I was having military rehab. Then I'd go, after that stint in rehab had finished, I'd go back to hospital to have further surgery, and then I'd have some rest at home to heal, and then I'd go back to rehab. And then that cycle pretty much happened for the next 3 years. And then it eventually whittled down where I didn't need the rehab so much. So in total, it was 5 years I was going backwards and forwards to the hospital and home.
So your first night out of hospital after the incident was actually Bonfire night of
that's right,
all days.
Yeah.
So what was that like?
Well, they let me home for the weekend as they saw me stable enough, and it did just happen to fall on Bonfire night. And I thought, I'm very well aware of the potential of PTSD or falling into a state of depression through traumatic events, and I know they can stem from things directly linked to the events. And I knew mine being fire, that I needed to sort of get a rein on it before it took control of me. So I just went to a family barbecue and family bonfire night and sort of confronted it before it had a chance to sort of manifest in my mind. And I think because I just had that, obviously I was still 18 years old as well, so I was that cocky confidence of an 18-year-old, and sort of almost seen it as a little challenge to myself and sort of faced it head on. And looking back at it now, I think that was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made, because I can't imagine what it could have been like if I tried to hide away from it. So it was something that I was very glad that I forced myself to do.
Did that teach you or help you realise an important lesson regarding fear and discomfort? And how do you look upon fear and discomfort now?
Definitely, back then it was, I realised the extent of the danger to that, and wherever there's danger, there's going to be fear. But it also taught me that fear's good. It helps you sort of. It's a great motivator. It's great to help you achieve things, and that's what I realise now is that it is okay to be afraid sometimes, But importantly, being afraid shouldn't stop you from, doing things. If anything, it should just be used in a useful way to help you motivate and help you work around whatever it is you're trying to accomplish.
Do you often find you put yourself in a zone of discomfort, or do you get out of your comfort zone regularly now post the injury?
Oh yeah, it's I always try and just push myself that little bit further, because after the first few times you realise that a lot of the exciting moments in life are outside the comfort zone, and so much positivity and opportunity can come from being outside that comfort zone.
Yeah. Let's talk about running, and let's talk about how you latched on to running in your path to recovery.
Yeah. So it was the way I came across running was, I wasn't a particularly big runner when I was in the military. I was obviously fit and in shape, and running was a part of our training, but it was only after being injured that I looked at it in such a primitive, simple way of, if I can put one foot in front of the other and I'm physically moving forward, I was associating that in my head that I was moving forward in recovery as well. So whenever I started having dips in mood, or just things seemed to get begin on top of me, I'd try and get out there. And in the beginning, it was just going for a walk, which was only a couple of minutes long. But like I say, every time things started getting on top of me, and I could feel sort of like mood swings coming along, what just came with recovery, I'd get myself out there, try and do a bit of running, try and do a bit of walking, but just basically putting one foot in front of the other. And then this spiraled into long distance running. The more and more I sort of applied myself to it, and the opportunity came up to do the London Marathon. I think it was about 17 or 18 months after being injured. So I signed myself up to it, and I thought it was such a great focus, just getting out there, putting one foot in front of the other, really reflecting on what's going on. And what I learned after every single run that I did was I never regretted going out and doing it, and just the euphoria and the happiness what came with finishing a run. I don't think there would have been a drug out there what would have helped that.
And lots of research now shows that running does have a positive effect on the mood and on the brain, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does.
So after doing one marathon, you got a bit of a bug, and you set yourself a pretty hefty challenge. What was that? As my recovery was sort of coming to an end after 5 years, I did a couple more marathons, and I did a little bit of travelling, but I wanted to put the two of them together and sort of fundraise for the hospital. And I thought, you know what, it started off with, I'll run a marathon every week for a year, so 52 marathons. All over the world, wanted to fundraise, but the marathons had to be official, organised races. And as I started, this was in 2011, and as I started the challenge, I thought, you know what, I was enjoying it so much. Obviously, it had its challenges, but I was enjoying it so much that I wanted to carry on. And so I made it to 2 years and trying to do 100 marathons. And it was such a great experience traveling all over the world, really enjoying the sport of running, seeing the world, and just, if I'm honest, enjoying being alive, because after, the injury, it was so just energizing being out there and having the opportunity to do something as simple as going for a run. Obviously, the runs were really long, and there was marathons, and there was a lot of them, but it was enjoyable all the same. So how many have you done in total now?
So in total, official events, I've been counting from anything what's marathon or longer. So that's 149 at the moment.
Wow.
They've slowed down a little bit the past year or two, but I've been trying to focus on doing more ultra marathons.
And let's just clarify, how long is an ultra marathon?
It's anything above 26 miles, so it can be as short as 30 miles or as long as 100 miles. So yeah, it's the back end of those distances that I've been trying to do over the past few years. So for example, running 100-mile ultra marathon, I managed to finish my first one last year along the Thames Path, and it took me 27 hours, but it was such a great experience, and it's just pushing myself outside that comfort zone.
That is amazing. So a normal marathon is just over 26 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And that's no longer really enough. That's no longer a challenge.
Well, they're different, every one of them. You know, I'll still get to a point in a marathon race that, I'm faced with the struggles of running a marathon. But yeah, they're all individual, and the best part about it is they're all over the world, and you get all those experiences while exploring at the same time.
So let's pick out a couple of the more obscure places you've done marathons. What sticks in your mind?
Okay, so recently this year I took part in a very famous race, the Marathon des Sables in the Sahara Desert, which this year it was 257 kilometers over 6 days, carrying all your equipment. The only thing you was replenished was with water. A few years back, I did a race very similar in distance and time frame, but in the Amazon jungle, which was horrifying because there's all manner of wildlife. The geographic North Pole, running on glacial ice. That was incredible. It was extremely cold, and when the wind picked up, it was reaching temperatures to minus 30 degrees. And I mean, likewise on Antarctica as well, on mainland Antarctica, I ran a 100-kilometer race there, which again it just looks so alien, but it's so beautiful, that part of the world, and I felt very lucky to be able to witness these parts of the world. But I would never would have done this if it weren't for being injured and discovering running and using racing as a way of exploring these places.
It's amazing. And let's talk about, you're taking on, let's forget a marathon. Let's talk about 100K or a 100-mile ultra marathon.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about, what is it like to hit that wall? What goes through your mind at that point when you first have that instinct that you're running low on energy? You might be approaching some kind of limit.
Yeah. Well, it seems every time, personally, I always hit quite a dip around in the first 20 miles. It's just that my mind gives off the impression that my body's extremely tired and I can't possibly go on anymore, and it's always a struggle around that sort of distance. But it's just one of those moments where you just have to fight on, even if it just means just walking for a few miles, sort of getting your head around the distance, and then you sort of convince yourself that if you're so tired, why am I still able to keep going? And you sort of convince yourself that you're not as actually tired as you think you are. And it just makes you realise how much stronger the body is than what the mind normally lets on. So it is all mind games. And then when you get to the back end of those races, you quite clearly are in a very, very tired and exhaustive state. But I find that mentally, that's where you become stronger because you're nearing the finish. Obviously, it's very difficult, and you do have to convince yourself to keep putting one foot in front of the other. But around that time of the race, that's all you need to do. Is if you can just put one foot in front of the other, you will get to the finish line. It's just convincing yourself and understanding that you're not going to get there quickly, but just keep going forward, and you will get there.
Do you think you've discovered your limits?
I've definitely discovered certain limits at times, because I have taken on some of these 100-mile races and I've not been able to finish, whether that's because of picking up a slight injury or just not having my mind completely in it. Sometimes you just know when it's not your day when it comes to these races, and that's nothing to be ashamed of if you have to pull out of a race. It's just that I find that I learn quite a lot more when I've pulled out of a race, because I can work on what went wrong, what I can work towards, and then hopefully in the future that helps. But it is every race is, like I said, it's its own individual experience. They all have their own struggles and their own highlights, which makes them so fun.
Something you once said to me was, the more you suffer, the greater the reward.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit more?
I find it's really true, because it feels like the more you're pouring into something. I mean, I'm using racing as an example, but like the harder that race is, the more you've struggled through it, the more you've just gone and pushed yourself through the distance. That final feeling of like knowing that you've put all the hard work in and you've got out the other side of it, it's how much work you've put in, so like you sort of relate that to the finishing sort of feelings, and they just feel so much sweeter, those finishing moments. I can say that with everything that I've tried in life, that if it's very difficult, normally the rewards are so much greater.
So let's talk about motivation in general. So what motivates you, and has that changed over time?
I find that there's a few things that do motivate me, and it's that they've all stayed pretty similar to when I was first injured. Since being injured, one of the things that I wanted to prove to myself in the start was, okay, I'm injured, I've been brought back to like square one. How can I make myself better? And that's, even though I'm not physically injured now, like I still have, the scars of injury, but I still constantly think, how can I improve my way of life? How can I improve, my experiences? And that's sort of always motivated me to try and push myself to, broaden my experiences, but whether that's travel or finish a particular race, because if anything, who doesn't want to be a better version of themselves? And you can only do that by pushing yourself.
So do you set goals for yourself?
All the time. It's I think it's really important to set goals, because you don't know where you're going otherwise. And when you do set goals and then you eventually achieve those goals, the feeling and the reward is just so much greater.
So is there anything in particular you really would like to achieve from now on?
From now on? Well, I know, my wife is, in the next 8 to 10 weeks, is going to give birth to our first son. So what I definitely want to achieve is, being the best possible father that I can be, and sort of pass on this sort of like adventurous sort of spirit. But no, I just want to see what the world has to offer. there's so much out there, and it's not going to fall into your lap. You know, you got to find these opportunities, and I think that's what's going to drive me.
Yeah. So let's talk about some philosophical questions. When are you happiest?
When am I happiest? Either when I'm spending time with those that I love, or I'm out there running.
And what about, do you think you're lucky?
Yeah, I think I'm very lucky. I mean, for example, an extra 10 seconds in that Burning Warrior, I probably couldn't be here. And that's brought down to 10 seconds. You know, yeah, serving on active duty, you know, things can go completely differently. So I do think I'm very lucky. Natural diseases, you know, how can you escape those sometimes? You know, feel very lucky indeed that I'm in the position that I am, and that I'm aware of where I am, and it just makes me want to enjoy life all the more.
Do you think about gratitude quite regularly?
Yeah, definitely, because it was gratitude what made me want to go and run for the hospital, because of those who worked, what they see is completely normal. You know, to me, that was life-changing, that was life-giving. And, you know, they work so hard, the staff at the hospital, you know, the doctors, nurses, all the physios, they changed my life. And that's, without them, I do feel that I wouldn't have would have the ability to do what I do now.
So let's talk about how do you react when things go badly, and how do you react when things go well?
When things go well, I find that it motivates me to push even harder, because, you know, you're almost like running on a high. So it's very easy to almost achieve more when things are going your way. But I find that when things aren't going your way, it's so much more difficult. But the learning experience is probably more valuable. So it can be very difficult to sort of handle it sometimes when it's not going well. You know, for example, dropping out of a race, you know, very disappointed at the time, you know, not 100% happy. You know, after you've finished and recovered, you convince yourself that you could have done a bit better, but it is just learning from those bad experiences.
From putting yourself in these extreme scenarios, do you feel like that gives you a reference point in terms of your emotions? And does that mean the kind of amplitude of your emotions are greater, or are they lessened as a result?
No, I think they're greater. You know, I've been lucky to be in these sort of extreme environments, and I've seen the people and the families who are often associated with these environments, and sometimes they're not in a fortunate enough position that, you know, we are, and what we take for granted. So it's a lot of these places are quite emotional when you do visit them, because, you know, not only are you seeing people and the way they live, and we're travelling there as almost as an escape, so to say. But the reality is that it's not always the same for the people who have to live that every single day. So it really is emotive when you actually do experience people who live there, and, you know, the reasons why you've been brought there yourself. So yeah, I do think it has made me more in tune with emotions.
If we talk about your mindset, and this can be on a day-to-day basis or while you're taking on a massive challenge, how would you kind of summarize the mindset you adopt?
I'm not sure, really. It's, you know, I do like to try and wake up every morning and think that if I can do at least one productive thing in the day, you know, it's a day worth living, because it does feel like it would be just so easy to just sit back and let life carry on, and before you know it, it's sort of run away. So yeah, the mindset of trying to just always try and do something a little bit productive, whether that's, an extreme challenge or something that's going to better your way of life, no matter how small it can be. I do think it's all about finding those things and finding what makes you happy.
So what would you classify as the hardest thing you've ever done?
I don't know, really. I don't like to pinpoint one particular thing, and that's the same with the happiest thing I've ever done, because I don't want to I don't want to set myself up thinking, say for example, the happiest thing I've ever done, that's sort of like almost saying that I'll never have another happiest thing ever. And that's the same with the hardest thing. I understand that there's always going to be hard moments in life. So, but if I did have to narrow it down, I suppose being injured would have been difficult. But who knows? Something might happen where something might be more difficult than that. But if it does, it does. But if it doesn't, live and let live.
So let's talk about what would you say to your 18-year-old self?
18-year-old self.
Or maybe, so let's rephrase this. So when you were 18, 19, so the injury happened when you were 18.
Yeah.
So maybe, what would you say to your 16-year-old self?
16-year-old self. If I'm completely honest, do what you're doing. I wouldn't change being injured, or, I wouldn't give a heads up about, the dangers or the horrible, injury, what's about to happen. But no, just stick through it, keep doing what you're doing and enjoy.
It's so fascinating you say that, isn't it? I find that a brilliant insight, that even if you knew that injury was coming, you would not want to prevent it.
No.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, obviously that day and the following years of recovery from the injury, they were horrific. There's no way about it. I do genuinely feel that anyone who suffers burn injuries, my heart goes out to them, because it's so enduring that it's a horrible injury. But you know what? This is what's supposed to happen, and if I didn't go through that injury, I wouldn't have what I have now. I wouldn't have, the emotions, what drive me, the need to want to, push the boundaries or go outside those comfort zones. I probably wouldn't have, seen half the world. And in that, I wouldn't have met the people that I have met. And who knows, I could be somewhere else, and I probably wouldn't have even met my wife, so I just wouldn't change anything for the world, and that means all the horrible parts as well.
So, do you have any belief systems, or do you have any rituals or routines that you follow? And this can be anything that's sort of spiritual, philosophical, religious, it can be non-religious. Just anything that you find is a good sort of anchor point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer of, certain things do just happen in life. You can control things to a certain point, but at the end of the day, if something's going to happen, it's going to happen. I suppose fate. But yeah, other than that, it just refers back to, just trying to be the best self that you can be. And yeah, I've got quite a few little rituals depending on what's going to happen. But yeah, it's just all about psyching yourself up to do whatever it is you're going to do. And, if you are going to attempt something, give it everything you've got.
So last couple of questions. now you're a qualified personal trainer. I'm sure when you take on 100k or even a marathon or a 100-mile race, how do you fuel yourself before an attempt like that?
Fuel as in food well, if I'm honest, I love eating food. I love cooking. I love, I even love the bad food as well. So no, it is because it that falls under what you enjoy as well, and because I enjoy eating, I wouldn't want to restrict myself from anything that I do enjoy. But yeah, on the leads up to say an important race, I will eat more sort of protein and fatty foods. But yeah, nothing what upsets my stomach or anything. And yeah, just enjoy the food, and then and it's the same after a race. You've worked really hard, so yeah, have a few beers, get that takeaway in. It's all that doing it in moderation. That's where it all boils down to, and yeah, having enjoyment in that as well.
And last question is, how does it feel when you've completed the Marathon des Sables, when you've done 100 miles, when you've done 100k, when you've completed a marathon?
Sometimes it's amazing. Don't get me wrong when you do complete an event, but I think people, I think if anyone else who does several events, they might understand. But it's after you do finish an event, what you've been focusing on for say a number of months, and then all of a sudden it's finished and it's over. Sometimes it can leave a bit of a sort of a hole. What do you do next? So if there's nothing to follow that on, it can be quite sad sometimes after you've finished, a particularly big event. So I suppose that's why I've always got something coming up, But yeah, that initially after completing something that you have worked so hard towards, the feeling's amazing, and you're almost proud of yourself, and that's sort of a huge positive cycle. Just sort of like, you finish a race, well, you work hard, you finish a race, that motivates you to do the next one then, and it's sort of like, say, a positive sort of cycle.
That sounds like a perfect place to finish it. Thanks very much, Karl.
Thanks very much, Toby.